The laptop had to stay open. That was the only instruction that mattered. Not the handcuffs, not the charges, not the years of surveillance and burned covers and encrypted dead ends that had brought them to this exact moment. All of it came down to 30 seconds and one open screen. October 1st, 2013. Glen Park branch of the San Francisco Public Library. A quiet Tuesday afternoon. Somewhere inside, the man who had built the most sophisticated criminal marketplace in internet history was sitting at a table, running his empire in plain sight. Two agents walked in and started arguing. Loudly, publicly. To anyone in the building, they looked like a couple whose fight had followed them through the wrong door. People glanced over. Most looked away. And at a corner table, a young man looked up from his screen. That was the moment. A third agent moved. The laptop stayed open. The session stayed live. And Dread Pirate Roberts, the ghost who had defied law enforcement for 2.5 years, had a face. His name was Ross Ulbricht, 29 years old, Eagle Scout, physics graduate, described by friends as thoughtful, principled, and sensitive. And for the past 2 years, he had been operating a black market processing more than $1 billion in illegal transactions that no one in law enforcement had been able to locate. Until now. But what investigators were about to discover was that the story didn't end with his arrest. Because while some agents had been hunting Dread Pirate Roberts, others had been quietly stealing from him. To understand how it all collapsed, you have to go back to the beginning. To a graduate student with a libertarian manifesto in a cabin in Texas, and a belief that he could build something the government could never touch. Ross Ulbricht was not a conventional criminal. He had earned a master's degree in materials science and engineering from Penn State. He was, by every public account, intelligent and idealistic. On his LinkedIn page, publicly visible under his real name, he wrote that he wanted to use economic theory as a means to abolish coercion and aggression amongst mankind. He described himself as running what he called an economic simulation, a free market experiment, a way to show the world what commerce could look like without the interference of government. What he was actually building was Silk Road. In January 2011, a post appeared on a small internet forum for mushroom enthusiasts. A user calling themselves Altoid asked a simple question. Had anyone seen this new website called Silk Road? It was the first mention of the site on the open internet. And it was, though no one realized it yet, the first mistake of many. Silk Road operated on the Tor network and processed every transaction in Bitcoin. Two systems that together created a powerful layer of anonymity. Vendors listed drugs the way eBay sellers list electronics, with photographs, descriptions, user reviews, and shipping policies. Cannabis, cocaine, heroin, MDMA, psychedelics, organized into categories, rated by buyers, delivered through ordinary postal systems in discrete packaging. By late 2013, the site had nearly 13,000 listings for controlled substances alone and had facilitated what prosecutors estimated at $1.2 billion in total sales. Running all of it under a name borrowed from a fictional pirate who could never be identified because the name itself was a disguise, was Dread Pirate Roberts. And for the FBI, DEA, Homeland Security, and IRS agents who all had open investigations into the site, finding the person behind that name felt for a very long time like chasing a ghost. The investigation had been running for nearly 2 years by mid-2013, and it was Jared Yegian of the Department of Homeland Security who had gone deepest. He had first encountered Silk Road in 2011 when drug shipments began appearing at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. Over the following 2 years, he made more than 50 undercover drug purchases and logged thousands of hours on the platform, working his way toward the site's inner circle. By summer 2013, Yegian was convinced he knew who Dread Pirate Roberts was, and the name wasn't Ulbricht. The investigation board in the FBI's New York field office had arrows pointing toward Mark Harpeles, the CEO of MT Gox, the Japan-based Bitcoin exchange that processed roughly 70% of all Bitcoin transactions worldwide. Agents had built a circumstantial case. They were reportedly close to seeking an indictment. And then a tax investigator from the IRS walked into the office, glanced at the board, and quietly said he had someone else in mind. Gary Alford had no background in cryptocurrency, no dark web expertise, No specialized surveillance tools. What he had was a different instinct. If someone built a hidden marketplace at some point before it was famous, they had to advertise it. And people who advertise make mistakes at the beginning when they're not yet careful. Alfred typed silkroad.onion into Google. He was looking for the oldest result he could find. One result surfaced, a post from January 2011, quoting a message from a user called Altoid, asking whether anyone had heard of Silk Road. Alfred clicked through the profile. He found more posts. And then, in October 2011, he found a job listing. Altoid was looking for an IT professional to help with a Bitcoin startup. The post asked interested parties to send their responses to a specific email address. The address was rossulbricht@gmail.com. 3 clicks, 2 years of multi-agency surveillance. An attacks investigator had just identified Dread Pirate Roberts with a Google search. He brought his findings to colleagues. The reaction was interested but cautious. The link was suggestive, not conclusive. So Alfred kept working on his own time. In the evenings, on weekends, he found a public StoryCorps interview featuring a young man from Austin who had moved to San Francisco. He found posts from a user called Frosty discussing technical problems that looked like Silk Road infrastructure. He found Ulbricht's YouTube channel, titled "Oh Yeah, Ross," the word yes spelled Y-A. When he relayed that detail to investigators who had been chatting for months with someone inside Silk Road's administration, someone who repeatedly typed the word always spelled Y-A, there was silence on the phone. Then, in July 2013, U.S. Customs agents intercepted a package at the border. Inside, 9 fake driver's licenses, different names, same photograph. The address on the package belonged to a property in San Francisco rented by Ross Ulbricht. The case was built. Surveillance began. And on October 1st, the team executed the plan that required one thing above everything else. The laptop had to stay open. It did. The session was active. And on Ulbricht's screen, investigators found what they had been looking for: Silk Road's administrative backend, open and running. On his hard drive, they found a personal journal, a detailed expense spreadsheet, chat logs with staff members and vendors, evidence that placed him at the center of the entire operation. In his own words, Dread Pirate Roberts was in custody. Silk Road was shut down the same afternoon. If you're finding this story compelling and want more deep investigative documentaries like this, consider subscribing. Now, back to the story. The trial began in January 2015. The prosecution's case was extensive: journals, chat logs, financial records, the Altoid email, the fake IDs, travel records cross-referenced against chat logs found on the laptop. Ulbricht's defense acknowledged he had created Silk Road, but argued he had quickly handed it off to others and been lured back near the time of his arrest as a fall guy. The jury rejected that argument. On February 4th, 2015, Ulbricht was convicted on all 7 counts. The sentence handed down in May 2015 was double life imprisonment plus 40 years, with no possibility of parole. That should have been the end of it. The dark web's most wanted, identified, convicted, imprisoned. A story about hubris meeting patience. About the limits of anonymity when the humans using it keep making human mistakes. But there was something no one on Ulbricht's defense team had been told. Something that had been happening inside the investigation all along. Something that, when it finally came out, reframed the entire case. Karl Mark Forsfor was a 15-year veteran of the DEA. He had been the lead undercover agent in direct contact with Ulbricht, operating a DEA-sanctioned persona called Knob. For months, Force had cultivated a relationship with Dread Pirate Roberts, posing as a drug insider with connections. Then, according to federal prosecutors, he created an entirely separate, unauthorized persona and used it to sell Ulbricht exactly what Ulbricht feared most: inside information about the federal investigation being conducted out of user accounts and into a wallet only he controlled. He then converted the stolen Bitcoin at Mt. Gox into approximately $820,000 in U.S. currency. The theft had a consequence no one anticipated. When Ulbricht discovered that his platform had been accessed using Green's credentials, he concluded Green had betrayed him. That belief, according to prosecutors, led Ulbricht to arrange for Green's murder, a chain of events that became one of the most serious allegations in the case against him. A federal agent had stolen from the man he was investigating, and that theft had directly triggered what prosecutors called an attempted killing. The agents hunting Dread Pirate Roberts had become part of his story in ways none of them could have predicted. The corruption was eventually uncovered not by internal affairs, but by another investigator working the cryptocurrency trail. IRS agent Tigran Gambarian spent months analyzing blockchain transactions, following the movement of Bitcoin through wallets and exchanges until the pattern resolved into names. In March 2015, both Force and Bridges were charged. Force pleaded guilty to money laundering, obstruction of justice, and extortion under color of official right. Bridges pleaded guilty to money laundering and obstruction. Force was sentenced to 6.5 years. Bridges received nearly 6. Then Bridges did something almost incomprehensible. Before reporting to begin serving his sentence, he was arrested again, this time for stealing approximately 1,600 Bitcoin from a digital wallet belonging to the United States government. The same instincts, the same methods, just a different target. He received an additional 24 months to be served consecutively. Ulbricht's defense argued that the agent's corruption had contaminated the investigation so thoroughly that his conviction could not stand. The courts disagreed. The core evidence, his journals, his chat logs, the records on his laptop, had been gathered on a separate track, untouched by what Force and Bridges had done. The appeals failed. The sentence held. The corruption had never been disclosed to his defense team before or during the trial. For more than a decade, Ulbricht remained in federal prison. His mother relocated to Colorado to be closer to him. A growing campaign argued that double life without parole for a nonviolent offense, however large in scale, represented a sentence that had crossed beyond justice into something else. The case became a reference point in arguments about digital civil liberties, the ethics of undercover law enforcement, and what accountability means when the investigators themselves become criminals. Then, on January 21st, 2025, President Donald Trump granted Ross Ulbricht a full and unconditional pardon. Trump had pledged the action at the 2024 Libertarian National Convention. That evening, Ulbricht walked out of a federal prison in Arizona. Photographs appeared on social media shortly after midnight. A man surrounded by family, free for the first time in 11 years. The Silk Road story resists easy conclusions. At its center is a young man who genuinely believed, that he was conducting a philosophical experiment, and who built a system that became responsible for the distribution of industrial quantities of narcotics, and who watched his own creation spiral beyond anything a philosophy could contain. Around him, the agents sent to dismantle what he built made decisions that were, in their own way, just as corrupting, stealing the money, selling the secrets, exploiting the very investigation they were sworn to conduct. And underneath all of it runs the thread that makes the story permanently instructive. The thing that brought Ross Ulbricht down wasn't the FBI's surveillance technology. It wasn't a breach of Tor. It wasn't a flaw in Bitcoin's cryptography. It was a forum post from 2011, a job listing, an email address with his full name in it, left behind when he was 26 years old and just beginning to believe he had built something the world could never trace back to him. The most sophisticated criminal marketplace in internet history was cracked open not by algorithms or court orders, but by one investigator with a Google search and a theory that people reveal themselves at the beginning before they know to be careful. That is what made it haunting, not the technology, not the billions, not even the corruption that festered inside the investigation itself. The hubris, the belief, held by nearly everyone in this story, that they were invisible. They weren't.